Hey, I'm Chris Eichen. This is the Modern Dad Council. Joining me today is Thomas Pfeiffer from the Good Men Project, Jay Ferry, Jay 40 of the Greatness Zone, and Ready for Life, and Eric Lehman of the Game Changer Movement. The Modern Dad Council meets to discuss important issues around parenting, relationships, and everything else in the world around being a modern dad. Today we're discussing challenges. What are some of the things that you struggle with in parenting or life in general? Now, Jay, you had said one thing you struggled with as a parent was over prioritizing work. Could you start us off with that?
Yeah, the part of it's in running your own business too. That you have to work in order to eat, and so do your kids. So where is the fine line between what time you spend with your family versus what time you commit to doing something that's purposeful for yourself? And I don't know that there's any guidelines, other than maybe you push it too far sometime, and then somebody comes back and tells you how you seem to not be very present. Then you know you've gone too far on one side, and then you go the other way and you find a client that's not that happy. Now you're too far on the other side. And to me, the challenge is where's that balance, that it sits someplace in the middle where it's as good as it can be on both sides, but at the same time, there's an opportunity for us to push it on that. And maybe it's just an awareness thing, that life isn't about getting all of it done all well perfectly. And it's just changing how we reframe what it means to be a parent when you run your own business, or to be a parent in a busy world where it's competitive and you need to earn some money to make sure the kids eat.
I think you nailed it, Jay. It is a balance, and it's listening. It's listening to both your kids and those other voices with your job, your clients, or your boss, or whomever is demanding things of you, because they will tell you. And when someone says, hey, you're not here or you're not being here, they're generally right. That's how they feel at that moment, and you can't really argue with that feeling. And if you start down the road of, but I am, and I do this and I do that, you're not addressing the person's feeling. So the first place to start with that is, I'm sorry, because someone is feeling that you've let them down in some way, and that feeling has to be addressed. But your kids will always tell you. And the thing I am trying to remember now, because it's interesting that we're talking about this, because I'm confronting this in my own life too. I have one son who's home sick from school today. He's in the other room, watching something, doing something while I'm doing this. And what I find is that our kids are constantly coming to us with these bids for attention. Dad, come look at this. Come, I want to show you this. And if we're working, particularly if we're working at home in the evening, or we're trying to juggle that. I'm parenting, but I'm sort of working at the same time. We say in a minute, or we go and we look and we don't really pay attention to it. And the thought hit me, as my son is 12, in a few years, he's not going to be coming to me with those bids for attention anymore. He's going to be doing his own thing, and when I try to push in, he's going to be pushing me out. He's going to say, leave me alone, I'm busy, whatever. So it's important to try to appreciate this time when he actually wants to share things about his life with me, from his games or his drawings, or whatever it is that he's doing, because it isn't, time will go by and that won't be happening anymore.
Yeah, and that's that balance, and I know that how do you show up to whatever it is that's here at the moment?
Right.
But to me, the challenge is that their voices turn into sometimes the loud voices, a lot like the rest of the world. You're determined to get something done because you've made a commitment, but you've made a commitment there too. So you've got all of this, voice going at you, and So I guess maybe the other question I'll throw out to us as dads is, how do you find some sanity in this? knowing that the world is yelling at us. Our kids are yelling at us, not yelling, but crying for attention. Everybody needs some attention. And what is it that we can do in our own head, so that we don't have a meltdown, feeling overwhelmed by being torn in absolutely every direction, and then feeling like you failed in every direction, because at the end of this, you shortchanged everybody somehow, because you couldn't complete everything that the work needed, and you couldn't complete everything the kid needed. So now you're half empty on this outlook. And so, what is it that we as dads can do, not to feel that, but to be confident that the expectation that we had was so large, no one could win in it. What's a pretty good way of getting through it and still feeling confident and in that you did your best?
Embrace imperfection. Embrace mess. Realize that you're never going to do a perfect job as a parent. You're never going to do a perfect job at your job. If you try to do one or the other, and you have both of those responsibilities in your life, you will fail at the other one. So
yeah, I don't like your answer. What else you got?
Well, I feel like the other opportunity is to redefine love, because I feel like the old model, the reason that we're hearing screaming happen is that we equate attention with love, and I feel like that's a big opportunity for redefinition. And it just, for some reason this week, that message became resoundingly clear. Like, attention is not love, but it substitutes quite well. So I feel like there is a loving way to say, hey, I love you, don't you? And I will be willing to show it to you, at 2:45. But right now, Daddy is showing his love to his commitment, that has this time limitation on it. But I guess that's the interesting thing with our kids. Is like, I love them infinitely. I love you all finitely in some way. I mean, like in some in some other not that I love everyone infinitely, but I feel like if there needed to be a compare and contrast, like, they need to know that I am like 24/7 their dad and their loving dad. However, they may not agree with all of my decisions or all of the ways that I allocate time and attention. And so, like, the big question is, like, who gets to make that decision, and what do we do with the self-talk that says that we're letting everyone down? I think that's what we're here to, like, support each other around, and I think it's beautiful for us to hold the space of, let's choose a different word besides imperfection, but what does it mean to be the parent with the perspective that we have? No one's read all the books that you've read. No one, even if they have, no one's interpreted them the way that you have. So I think it's a matter of, I'm losing you guys, but I'll read.
He always does that. As soon as he has this killer point to make, he leaves us.
Right. He's like, well,
yeah, tune in next week when I'll give you the rest of the answer.
right.
I guess the biggest thing about this, and the reason to throw it out as a conversation today was, dads are loaded with challenge, the way everybody is. And what is our way of noticing what they are, calling it for what it is, and then coming up with a practical solution in the moment? Instead of thinking that, we have to have all of this power that we must always get it right. So, Thomas, I appreciate that, why is it that the only expectation is we have to do both of these or all of these really well, when in fact, the law says that we can't. So what is as good as we can do in it, and then how do we draw some lines about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable?
Well, to Eric's question, of who gets to make the decision, we have to make the decision. So if we're torn in two ways or pulled in two ways, we have to make a decision and then understand that decision has consequences, and not not be held hostage in making that decision, either to a sort of manipulative emotional appeal, because kids can throw a very manipulative emotional appeal at us, that can throw a wrench in our work, but also not to be held hostage to, or to sort of put it in perspective with the work thing, like, what, if I get this thing done tomorrow and I don't get this thing done tonight, the world is not going to end. I'm still going to succeed. I'm still going to get paid, whatever. So filtering out on the one hand, the kid screaming, and on the other hand, the voice inside that says, well, I had this self-imposed deadline for myself, and if I don't make my self-imposed deadline, I'm a failure.
Right. Yeah,
it's just reframing the conversation, I think, and that's part of where I guess I was trying to go. Though I know what the challenge is, I think the solution in it, and it might be a solution to a lot of the things that we bring up as we pass it to you, to Chris, and to you, Thomas, about a challenge that you have. Maybe it's reframing it as a challenge. Maybe we just we're stuck in the word that says this is a problem. No, it's not a problem. It's just the way life is. Here's how do we want to see this so that we get the best balance in here. And in the process, isn't there a lesson for our kids as we try and manage all of these pieces? How might we show our kids that sometimes it doesn't all work out, but here's how we don't lose our cool. Here's how we stay grounded. We don't, run into a string of expletive deleteds. We don't need to do any of that. We just see the world in the world's terms and say, okay, well, this one just didn't go that well, and I'm so sorry I missed this, and then just have an honest conversation about what's true. And I think already we'd be very different with our kids.
I agree with you. Yeah. So framing it as not a crisis, even though it seems when it's happening, it can feel like a crisis. So breathing, stepping back a little bit, trying to act with intention instead of react with
meltdown.
The meltdown and the stuff that we react with. So I have a challenge that I face with being the parent of two boys, one who now lives with me full time. He's 12, and his brother comes back and forth and spends part of the time with his mother. And so there are adjustment issues, and the timing of when my younger son comes, and the two of them sort of getting used to spending a little time together again, and then having to be apart, and all of that. But one thing I've noticed is that in any family, with any two people, there are patterns and dynamics. But in any family, you've got a couple of kids, you have patterns, behavior patterns, and dynamics going on. And so, how do you recognize those and again, sort of step back and say, well, wait a minute, this is a pattern, this thing that leads to conflict among all of us, or this thing that leads to a meltdown of one child or whatever. There's an underlying pattern behind that of behavior that's starting in one place, and then in another place, a certain reaction to it fuels it, and then another reaction to it, and all of that. And so I think that's a challenge for a parent to sort of, because when you don't have another parent there to observe, there's no one watching you. So it's hard to see the pattern sometimes.
Yeah.
But to try to look for that, and I think the key is if you're experiencing the same type of situation over and over again, you find yourself saying the same thing, you find yourself dealing with one kid is having these emotions, the other one is having these emotions, this and that. You say, wait a minute. This isn't an isolated incident. This is a pattern. There's something that's making this happen, and I can change that. I can talk to my kids about it. I can say, you know what? You're doing this, and then you're doing this in response to that, and then you guys are both getting me angry, and then that makes you feel this way. So how can we break that cycle?
Well, so my coach hat comes on a little bit here, and this one, it's easy when it's not mine, it's yours.
Right.
I can't wear my own coach hat when it's my stuff.
I'm giving it to you.
So I wondered if maybe the first thing when things like that happen is not to tell, but rather to ask.
Yeah.
What do you think is going on with you when you have this kind of response? And I have no idea. You know, so my kids are older now, and that's a tough situation, and I'm not exactly sure, you know, to what emotional degree they're at. So that would, to me, would determine whether you have to take control and manage their safety versus I just want to get some information. And the information, I think, would be really important to find out from their perspective. You know, maybe they can't articulate yet why I'm angry right now. It's that, could I start to notice the places that get me angry? And
Right.
then we can start to ask some other questions to pull apart. Oh, it seems to be in situations like, oh yeah, the real reason why I'm angry is, you know, I hate that we're not living in the same house, or you know, it may come up to that. Then I know that brings you to another one that says, okay, this is what reality is. But to me, then there's another perfect question there that says, so what would make it the best it could be for right now? You know, and in that, maybe they're part of the solution, they get heard, and maybe it's not your challenge. I mean, it's your challenge, but it's not for you to solve, it's for you to guide.
Right.
And that might be really different, you know, for a dad that we think we have to solve, and maybe really all we have to do is put him together at a family meeting and have a discussion to see what comes out of it.
Right.
I know for me, I just share with my son like the things I'm going through and the practices I'm making. So when I make a mistake, I say, look, I screwed up, and this is, I had an opportunity at this point when I was feeling this way to do this, and instead I chose to do this, and that was the you know, I lost my cool or whatever. This was the outcome, and I apologize for that. I recognize my error, and I know that moving forward, I just have to be more aware, and you know, next time I come into a similar situation, I'm a little better prepared to handle it. And so having that conversation with him, then when he gets in those same situations, he's like, oh, I remember my dad telling me about being aware. So there's a little bit of a brag here, but he got in trouble. Yeah, he got in trouble at school, and he got a detention or demerit or whatever. He had to stay after school, and
That's the brag.
the teacher. Yeah, well, no, it's coming. Hold on. So it was something to do like he turned in homework late, but here he sent it to the wrong place. So it was a technicality he got in trouble on. So I let it slide.
Flag and play.
But this is what he did. So he was supposed to send it to or upload it onto Google Drive, and instead he emailed it to his teacher. So because it wasn't in Google Drive, he failed to turn the report in on time. So and I was like, so the teacher explained to him, I'm sorry, you're getting a detention, and this is why, and explained the reasoning. And he just goes, you know, you're absolutely right. I made a mistake, and I apologize for that, and I'll take the penalty haul. And just like, she actually called me to say, hey, you know, he got a penalty haul for not turning this, you know, and explain the situation. But then commended me on how well he took responsibility for it. And so he really showed up in that moment powerfully. And so then when I then have to approach him for the fact that he didn't get his homework done in time, it's like, you have this figured out. So you know your punishment is to go to the penalty hall. Like, there's no more punishment that I need to give to you because you understand or you realize the error. And so perfect. It worked. Job well done, Dad. No, and you know what I mean? But that was my attaboy to him is, you know, when you handle things appropriately, the outcome's a lot better. He would have handled the situation differently and been like, well, this is stupid, I sent it to this, and then got all defensive and everything else, and not taking ownership, then our discussion would have been a little different.
Chris, can I ask you? So
that's my brag.
It's a terrific brag. Here's a question I have though. How do you you know that great line that says, "What gets rewarded gets repeated." So you just had an opportunity for your son to exhibit a really significant virtue, ownership, accountability. How then can you? And I know this is a little bit off base from where we are today, but how do you manage to continue that conversation about supporting a virtue? So it isn't that you just got your homework done; it's that you took ownership about behaviors. And how might you be watching for other places in his life where he does that? Or when he doesn't do it, remind him of, hey, talk to me a little bit about what it was like when you did take ownership back in front of the teacher. How might that, help us here, or how might that be something that you should be thinking about here? We frequently, the thing that I didn't want to do is just gloss over the fact that he did it. I love that you bragged about it, but the brag can be an ongoing, supportive, virtue-based acknowledgement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Never miss an opportunity to catch him doing something great and applauding the greatness that came behind the actions.
Well, I don't know the whole story in advance of what I'm about to say, so I apologize if I'm off base at all. It's just I'm just thinking about what my friend Dan, who talks about character building would say is like, how do we reshape this model so that it's not our attaboys and our approval that matters. It's something intrinsic and internal. And I feel like that's really, if I were to come to this, well, I'm coming to this council with that as my challenge. Like that's what I want to do. I mean, I guess, I have a scenario that I'd love to share, but I want to learn more about, because I feel like we are holding the space for a new way of parenting or a new way of fatherhood. And, in light of what we're learning about character building and how we want to help our kids kind of seek their own approval, like, what are those conversations like? Because I think we're transitioning towards those conversations, and I think we're in that mid space, in that messy area. But, like, what could that conversation look like if we were not necessarily giving them the attaboy from us, but if we were like, well, how does that feel? How does it feel to own your own consequences and to, you know what I mean? Rather than just giving them the attaboy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I know they need to learn it from someplace, but yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, acknowledgement and validation is good to get you going, but if you get plugged into it your whole life, then all of a sudden everybody else's conversation about you turns into your own sense of value. That's a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just don't want to create another monster. I kind of and for some reason, I turned 42 on Tuesday, and 42 in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy means that I'm like the answer or whatever. Like now, I just need to figure out what the question is. So like that being said, how do we stem the tide of like this kind of generation on generation off approval seeking energy, and how do we shift that in this generation, and just kind of how do we hold each other accountable to a new way of fathering that that creates people who build their own character rather than us saying the attaboy for our fatherhood, patting ourselves on the back for what we just did.
Thomas, that sounds like a great article for the Good Men Project.
Yeah, we run a lot of stuff on parenting and the challenges that fathers face. Particularly the dad being role model for boys. And developing behavior, and as from the Good Men Project perspective, what I would say is that I think a lot of fathers, may have this tendency to impress a certain type of masculinity on boys. Take your punishment like a man, man up, or things like that, this very old, limited, restrictive, non-emotional way of approaching things. But being in touch with our emotions is so important. You know, coming back to the questions that you raised, you know, how do you feel about this? What are you feeling right now? What are you experiencing in your head? And getting in touch with that and giving boys and young men the freedom to feel those feelings and express those feelings and know that those feelings matter. You know, I mean, even if it's I'm angry with you right now because you're not here, you're not paying attention to me, whatever the thing is, or you know, I did great, you know, whoop whoop. I mean, and you know, to praise the things, that you really do want to reinforce, because we are the models and we are the ones who are shaping these kids' behavior.
Well, I wonder, Eric. I mean, I think maybe Thomas is on to the half step that has to move us from where we are to getting closer to where you mentioned that how are we more connected to our own sense of self and use that as our own barometer of a good life and good character rather than constantly look for the validation of everybody around us. And the first part, I guess, would be that we get to trust that our emotions are fine to have. Yep. And that they talk to us about really important things, and it's okay as a man or it's okay as a boy to have those because they're just giving you information about your world. And so maybe that's the half step, is we do have to migrate to being much more, you know, question-minded as parents to make our kids own and see and experience and comment on that stuff, and then realize that they can do that without us being there, so that they don't constantly need the validation. I'm doing this so that Dad's proud of me. No, do it because you're proud of you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And your dad will be proud of you for that, rather than I'm only doing it. I remember, it's funny, years and years ago, but I brought this up just when we were talking about it. So I have 5 siblings. I'm the third. So my older sister, my older brother, and then me. This is back in grammar school, in 6th grade. They would give a citizenship award out to kids that exhibited really good behavior in school. So my older sister was like a charm. She got it. My older brother wasn't always a charm. He got it. And I remember I got it. And I remember saying to my father, you know, this is great. You know, the 40 family is keeping the tradition going. And he said, this is not about that kind of tradition. This is about whether this inspires, you know, really great behavior in each one of you. So you don't have to look at your siblings and keep a tradition going on. This is about you and how you show up. I so was then hurt by thinking, you know, I was looking for validation. Hey, I'm keeping the line going here. And
right.
He was trying to remind me of a lesson that I wouldn't get for a very long time, that great, but that's not why we do it.
Right.
You know, we'll celebrate the fact that we are. That's cool. And any dad would be proud that three out of 3 kids got this award, but who are you on the inside that helped you earn that award? Was really where he was going. Now, sometimes his tactics always weren't easy, but the delivery of that sometimes.
I don't know if I've ever heard a more understated word.
I was the emotional kid, so, you know, unless it was good job, Jay, you know, I was ready to have a meltdown. So,
meltdown, gotcha.
But I can see that, and maybe that's another challenge too. Where is that fine line for dads to be supportive without being overly helicopter? And so this movement, and this is why I like that we're talking about it. Maybe the bigger challenge isn't that we have a personal challenge, but we're all living this one piece of challenge that just seems to show up in all of us all the time. Where's too much? You're too gushy. Now you're not really a man. You're too stern. You're not close. Well, who can possibly live in this range? I don't even know where it's supposed to be. And we're trying to inspire the next kids.
Well, I mean, it just sounds like, you know, that the present parent is really the goal, you know, and present doesn't necessarily speak to any side of that spectrum. You know, it's just in that moment, you know, fully there. And I feel like that's where we get to check ourselves and say, am I 85% here? Am I fully here? You know, am I projecting something that happened when I was in 3rd grade onto my kids? You know, like where you know, how present am I? And then I feel like that's where we get to take our breath and then maybe we can model the breathtaking, you know, doing with our kids, because I think, you know, I'll still, I mean, this is, I don't know if this is an attaboy for me or my parenting, and I think I've shared this story already, but, you know, I spoke to my kids about how I would deal with stress when I was going through a lot of stuff, and I told them that I would just go out to a pile of wood and split it, you know, for an hour until, like, my arms just, you know, were done, you know, and whatever imagery I needed to use to get through the most stubborn pieces of wood, I used, you know, and whoever's head needed to be that piece of wood was that piece of wood, but I didn't inflict harm on another human. So I just recall a day about 1.5 years ago where my daughter got into this little spat with her brother. She's like, I don't know, 9 at the time, 8 or 9, and she gets all like in a huff, and then, you know, she just gets done with her huff, and she just like darts out the door, and like my gut just knew, like, she's just gonna go to the woodpile, and she did. And it was like, it was the most hysterical, because I mean, like, you know, she wasn't really supposed to split wood on her own, but I was just like, oh, this is awesome, like, you know, like, this is the best, you know, just like example of like how to just live into anger management. And I was like, yay, you know, like, she just left a fight that could have escalated into physical violence against her brother, and instead she beat the crap out of wood, and it was just fun to watch.
I see a new Milton Bradley game called Woodpile, you know.
Right? if I could just, you know, put a new label on, you know, splitting malls and just call it a game, you know, I think that would make $1 million, right?
Yeah.
City Slickers, the life, you know.
That's right. Every house must have a chopping block.
Right.
Well, and maybe that, you know, there's a whole lot of wisdom in that, Eric. Not just about the chopping, and the fact that, you know, here again, a virtue of patience and tolerance of redirecting where the anger went is something to, you know, that we could acknowledge and validate in our kids, just so they see it. Because, you know, sometimes we're in the moment, we can't label it. We don't know that's what it is, and so to help someone see it sometimes can give them the language to articulate it, say, oh, that's what it felt like, that's what it looked like, maybe that's what the validation's for. It's not to give them the crutch that they always are looking for, but how early in their development do we give them the language that they see it, and then can articulate it so they then can use that same language for themselves. And maybe the challenge, you know, about the woodpile is, how do we just rethink some of this stuff? That it was quite fine for someone to figure out what their solution to a problem was instead of us jumping in and solving it. You go to your room, you got a timeout, you in this room, you in that room. You didn't need to. You know, that how do we then, you know, see that we're getting some successes in our kids as they start to figure some of this stuff out, and not suffer with the fact that we have a challenge that our kids aren't getting along. It's that they worked it out, you know. So maybe it wasn't a challenge. Maybe the whole thing was something that's worthy of, you know, dessert out that night, because look, we handled something that previously wasn't going to get handled.
Well, and I think it brings up an interesting spiral, just like, oh wow, so now we're rewarding things with food and sugar, you know.
Okay, so it was a holistic organic fruit dessert.
But I mean, what I'm just saying is that maybe it's the Italian part. I don't want to generalize, but I mean, it's just really, yeah, right. So I mean, I just what I'm thinking about is that, like, you know, what was good about that is that it validated and said anger itself is not wrong.
Correct.
You know, and I think that's one of the messages that I think that is kind of messy and gray in this generation. I think a lot of people are saying, oh, you know, it's wrong to be angry. No, it's like it's a valid emotion. Yep. It probably shouldn't be the place that we make most of our decisions from, but it's totally a valid emotion. So I don't want to over dominate things, but like, I just wanted to kind of round it out and what was learnable from that experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one of the main struggles that I went through. So was with my anger. I was very reactive. So if I was in the mood, you know, I worked late hours and everything else. And so for me, it was being aware and recognizing that anger starting to rise up in me. So at first, it's like I'm pissed off and I'm reacting. So how do I handle that instead of when I feel myself about to react? How can I be aware and take a breath, take a moment, center myself, and then choose to show up bigger in that moment? And then the progression became, how can I feel that rise of anger before it's like I've got to stop myself from responding? And so it's an ongoing process and an ongoing like practice, right? Of getting just better and better and better. And we're always going to, at least I find with myself, it's like you move forward, and then you take like 3 steps forward and then like 1 step back. And it's like 3 steps forward and then another step back. And just keep going, keep progressing, keep practicing, and modeling that to our kids. Or, I try to model that to my son, so when I'm screwing up, I'm having that conversation with him, like, oh man, I'm really feeling messed up right now. So to handle this the way I'm feeling right now, I'm gonna go listen to some meditation music and just chill out in my chop wood in my head. That's how I do it. But yeah, so however, whatever methods are working for you or your family or that particular person, that's what I do, and I verbalize that to him so he knows, oh, well, that's how my dad handles it. And my idea is like introduce as many different methods of handling that frustration or that anger and things like that. So that way each kid's different, so each kid's going to have a unique way of handling it. So just introduce as many ideas as possible to them and allow them to choose.
Yeah, find out which ones I remember hearing once that, all this stuff isn't about being right or wrong or good or bad. It's whether it's productive or unproductive. And can it make a difference? Then maybe you should do it. If it didn't make a difference, remember that for next time so that you don't use that option. It's not a good option. No, I want to say that. It didn't serve you well. Mm-hmm. And just maybe, and so maybe the answer to all of the things that we're talking about today is around challenge is presence. How are we looking at what it is, and then giving ourselves the time to reframe it in a productive way, both for our own sanity and for the people around us.
Right.
And I think the other thing is to really, check in with our inner mentor and guide, and just to know that our gut is probably right. Probably what if our father's voice or our mother's voice is coming into our head, probably we should take a few more breaths until our own voice comes back. And I'm in this zone right now because I'm just like, wow, I feel like for some reason turning 42 different than 40 just makes me say, oh wow, my guidance system matters, and that's enough. That's valid. And it's taken 42 years to get that sense of ownership and self-validation. And I think the other big thing that I'm really tracking right now is just the idea of, attention being the goal for so many generations now. Is that we need to help actively disconnect the idea that attention means love, and lack of attention means someone doesn't love me. I think that's what I would love to challenge us, collectively, to dive into, because there's, especially in this world where, squeaky wheel gets the oil or whatever, all these different sayings. I think we have this belief that if we're not, if we're in total health and wellness, then we'll totally be ignored. And I think that's an interesting fear that seems to be, more and more reinforced. I don't know. I haven't fully fleshed that one out, but just kind of curious if anyone has any more about that.
Well, I mean, that's a big one for us to talk about. I'd love that on another show, too. Because I think the societal norm of, I mean, look at the guidelines we get. Unless we are taking our kids on vacations and spending a certain number of hours a week with our kids, then we're a bad parent. I mean, we even hear that. So, I mean, what guidance does that give our kids other than they now hear from the world that for some reason your circumstance is a little bit different and therefore you're a bad parent? And really all that's happened is they've been discouraged or dissuaded that the fact that you love them now doesn't matter because someone told them that it's a scorecard of number of hours or number of events that matter most about how we show you that we love you. And Tony, I just ran into that same thing with my youngest daughter just 2 weeks ago. And she just had a run-in about some perspectives with my partner, and it brought back a series of things that she'd never shared with me on, she was 4 when we divorced, and she has a couple of older sisters, and she told me that she thought, the older sisters got all the attention and she didn't. And she was still angry at me for not being there as much as I was for the older sisters. The first time I've heard it, she's 24. And so the moniker or the guidelines on you're a good parent if, that's what it is. You're a good parent if, okay, Thomas, here's probably a really good article, right? You're a good parent if.
Yeah.
Why is there an if in that?
There shouldn't be an if, and one of the things that we try to do at the Good Men Project is not be prescriptive, not say you should do this, you have to do this, you must do this in order to be a good whatever. We also, partly because we're called the Good Men Project, we say we do not want articles with good man in the title or the subtitle, because we're really not saying if you do this, you're a good man, or if you don't do this, you're not a good man. There's a huge difference between offering guidance and offering direction and options in this incredibly diverse world that we live in. And having a prescription for, this is what you have to do. You're not, and on the flip side of that, in relationships that aren't working, in my own coaching practice, I advise people to take the frame of good and bad completely out of the picture. Your partner isn't being good or bad when he or she's doing this. Divorce isn't good or bad. Stop thinking of it in those terms, because you're just making your decisions harder. Yeah. You just need to make a decision and honor your feelings and go with what you think is right.
Well, now I guess we're back to that what we talked about earlier is, who do we have to get the validation from in order to determine that we're fine? And we're our own product of the same problem with our kids, right? That we look to the world to say, well, I'm a good dad even though I'm divorced, and I've got to make up for the fact that I'm divorced, so I've got to make all this extra effort, and I've got all these rules in order to show up to this. Or what are the things that we collectively decide as a family, and I have a voice in that, and that's our goal, or that's our approach, so that we can not need an outside, loud, corroborative, or non-supportive voice telling us you're good or you're bad. I mean, it feels like to me it's like going to church. The entire process is, let me give you the rules if you want to play here.
Right.
And if you're not going to do that, I'll just tell you up front, you're bad. And if you're good. So, well, who wants to be bad? So, okay, I'll play your game.
Right.
Or, I just won't go there.
And that does come back to what we were talking about before, also with our kids letting us know, when we're doing a really good job and when we're not, and so here's my little brag. I asked my 12-year-old about a week or two ago, how am I doing? Am I doing enough for you? And I guess I was looking for a little bit of validation because I was kind of feeling like maybe I wasn't. Am I doing a good enough job as a dad for you? And what he said to me is, would I have come this far if you weren't?
Oh, good.
So, there was some some validation there that even with all of the imperfections, and there are plenty, that there's acknowledgement that, you know, my influence is having a good impact on him. But I think that is the measure, because if we start comparing ourselves, everybody's situation is different. You know, I mean, I go to Little League, you know, and I see that a lot of kids hit better than my 9-year-old. Oh God, you know, I bet those dads are out there. They're throwing the ball with him. They're helping him hit. You know, I got to be doing more. What's wrong with me that I'm not every day after school? You know, I only have him a couple days a week after school, but you know, he comes home after school. He doesn't want to do that. You know, and so you just you can only be the best you that you can be.
Yeah, and he doesn't enough to see it, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I think the other thing is that, like, if we're on that kind of merry-go-round of, I don't know, approval seeking, like I remember a few years back, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I was coaching my kids' like coach pitch softball team, and so yeah, I mean, like on some, you know, parameters or whatever, I'm like hitting out of the park, except for the fact that I didn't really know how to pitch that well. So I was hitting more kids than were actually like hitting the ball with the bat. Like I was literally hitting them like with the pitch. And so, like, you know, I got down on myself for that. You know, I mean, so like I think the first people that we get to be the most gentle with is ourselves. You know, I mean, like, let's get off of this hamster wheel and know that we, just by waking up, we're doing a pretty darn good job. And, you know, and I guess I want to go back to that situation with your son, because I'm just kind of curious if we can, you know, in this middle space, like, you know, break that down. And maybe there would have been an answer, you know, to your son saying, you know what, you probably would have come this far, you know, no matter what, you know, because I believe that you're here for a reason, regardless of my influence. You know what I mean? And how do we?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean, and that's something that I believe is really important with our kids and their accomplishments, is always to give them the credit. It's always their accomplishment. If they got through a situation, if they came out the other side of a divorce or something or whatever it is, that's their accomplishment. That's to their credit. Yes, we helped, we did whatever we were supposed to do or weren't supposed to do or whatever, but always to let them know, you know, no, that's not my accomplishment. That's your accomplishment, and you get the credit.
I don't know what movie it was in, but it was like a totally the antithesis of this. But a woman was saying, "I'm gonna love that boy so much, no woman will ever be good enough for him." and so, like, I think, you know, we in this framework on this council are kind of in that counter energy, saying, like, we're gonna love our kids so much that they know that they were the miracle workers, they were the magicians. And, you know, and that's the kind of love that I want to, you know, be about. And it's hard, I'll tell you. I mean, like, and I'm challenged with it. And I don't use the word hard much, but I'm just like, you know, there's time where I want to get the credit for something, you know, by being, you know, as Buddhist as I feel like I'm being. But I know that it's important for me to just, like, you know, let go of even winning in the moment for the greater good in the long run. And that's a big challenge for me. And I don't like, I'll just share a quick scenario. Like, I had a birthday gathering yesterday, and there was a chance that all 3 of my kids may not have even attended because they were concerned in advance that they wouldn't have fun, that there would be no one that they knew, there would, you know, it would drag on and they wouldn't get to sleep on time. And, you know, my son, who was complaining most about it in advance, wound up staying the latest because he found a way to, like, you know, build the fire and tend the fire and make, you know, what's it called, a torch. And so, you know, the same kid that was, like, reticent to, you know, to even attend the party is closing the like, the last one there. And so it was just one of those like, whoa, like, sometimes we need to check in with our inner guidance and say, you know what, come to this party, even though your guidance doesn't want to go there, kind of come and see what it's, see what it's all about before you prejudge it. So, I think that's the biggest challenge that I'm bringing to the table, because I think it comes with some of his mom's kind of influence, and I'll throw that out there, and like that's a hard place still for me to throw it out, but
Is that kind of where the that man up kind of thing comes into play though, where it's like step into the uncomfortable, challenge yourself, and experience new things. Like that to me, that's like man up, right?
I think if you can, stepping into your authority, stepping into
your power,
your power is very different from man up. Man up is a very specific, very damaging phrase that says cut off everything feminine / bad in your life. Don't be like a girl, man up and shut those emotions down and just be tough and don't even acknowledge that there's such a thing as pain or whatever. That's really unhealthy. But step into your healthy masculine authority. That's a wholly different thing.
That sounds like it's right there too, Chris. Step into your what was it, Tom? Step into your
healthy masculine authority. There is such a thing, and it's different from a father's voice is very different from a mother's voice.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Yep. No, absolutely, I agree, 100%. I just wonder if we could reframe what's the word? What am I looking for here? Like retitle that phrase like to mean something different, So, manning up is like stepping into your not necessarily masculinity, but maybe stepping into some of your femininity too.
Yeah, exactly.
As we
right. Well,
redefine the term man. Yeah.
Right. Healthy masculine energy encompasses aspects of feminine energy too. It's not just it's not just brute force.
Yeah, it's not arm wrestling.
Well,
right.
well, maybe it's human up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and I think that's the point is that there's adventure on both sides of masculine and feminine energy. It's just the question is are we gonna just not do anything that is uncomfortable or that we think might go in a different way than we want, or are we gonna be open to new outcomes that may he totally loved the fire, loved it in such a huge way that it was great. And I don't know if that was a particularly masculine or feminine thing, but it was definitely indications that he was totally my child.
Right.
I have a deep love for fire. So, and he's probably going to be the first one of my children to firewalk with me. So so who knows? But anyway, it's just a really interesting time, because I think that the real challenge is how do I deal with some of the programming that comes from the other household,
Right.
And that's the macro question.
That's hard.
So does anybody else have any other comments to make on that? It's getting to time, so we're gonna wrap up. But if everybody's good, then
Good.
I'd like to thank you for checking out the Modern Dad Council, and we'll see you guys next week.